Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to start the third and the final session. Can I request all of you to settle down, please? We're waiting for a couple of other panelists also to join us, but in the interest of time, and we don't want to keep our guests waiting too long, so we're going to start this panel. So can I request all of you to take your seats, please, and settle down? Okay, so here we are, our last panel in this 1.5-day annual forum of PAFI. I'm sure you've taken away a lot in the last many sessions, but this session we wanted to also make sure is going to be an interesting power-packed session. And as you know, we had a very good conversation at our secretary session yesterday, so we are really honored to have our secretary session today also here. And this session is going to be focusing on jobs and governance strategies for 2030. The theme, as you know, for our conference and for our guests, it's been about the vision of 7 trillion and how do we get around to achieving that. And while there'll constantly be enhancements of administration processes, integrating of technologies and making sure there's strong feedback mechanisms and stakeholder consultations to get to this long-term economic growth plan. But what is probably required a lot of more focus on is how do we do job creation and keep the level of governance high. And job creations are, of course, going to help boost societal stability, ensure urban development, and increase overall demand. And while there are many existing policies, but at the end of the day, how do we make sure the public-private partnerships really start making a difference on ground and we can all participate in delivering the execution of this vision? So some of the questions our panelists will be discussing today is the role of public-private partnerships. How can India balance the rapid job creation with the adoption of technology in various sectors? And of course, what role can states play? And we are hoping our panelists on the state play also will come in, but of course the others will talk about it. So without much further ado, I'm going to introduce the panelists here today. We have K. Srinivas, who is Secretary, Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here. And I also have to invite Atul Kumar Tiwari, Secretary, Ministry for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, who is very critical to this sector. And thank you so much, sir. You've been very patient. He arrived here well in time. So we are honored to have you. And then moderating this session is going to be my colleague Shivnath Thokral. Many of you know him as a media and comms professional. And he's, of course, treasurer for PAFI and vice president public policy at Meta. And I also have Chetan Krishnaswamy, who's going to do the vote of thanks. He's a vice president for PAFI this year and also the vice president public policy at Amazon. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Shivnath.
Thanks, Deepshika. Always a pleasure, especially when we are standing in between lunch and you guys. So we'll make sure it is pretty focused and ends on time. We are awaiting the METI secretary as well. So he will join us on stage as we start. I think with a panel like this, the obvious question is, how do we get it going? Because in the last 1.5 days, to Mr. Tiwari and Srinivas sir, we've heard a lot of, I would say, spirited conversations around innovation, confidence in the economy, confidence in the labor force of the country, and that we are set to go and the world is taking notice and high nominal growth rate. But eventually, it boils down to whether that converts into a paycheck at the end of the month, which basically means, do I have a job to ride on that innovation? Do I have a job to convert that confidence into something which will turn into a livelihood for me? So you mentioned, Deepshika, that Mr. Tiwari came on time. I think it's a great skill. So maybe, Mr. Tiwari, I should start with you. A lot of the job creation in this economy of the $7 trillion vision would be linked to whether we have the right people for the jobs of the $7 trillion economy. We do hear about technology-led industrialization, but does it really or will it really translate into jobs, and what is your exact game plan to achieve that?
You're talking about the
Job creation.
yeah.
And whether we have the right skills and what are the gap between where you see the jobs are and where the skill levels are.
As of now, there is a mismatch. Let's admit that. And while we are talking about the improvement in the physical infrastructure, it's time for us to also think about the human development aspects and the human capital infrastructure as well. And it is necessary for us to essentially see the education, skill, employment, or employability continuum. And it is in this regard that the government, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, that we have the National Education Policy, which integrates the education with the skilling. We are also a lot of things which are happening on the labor part. The Labor Secretary was there yesterday. So that is also one part which is being looked after. And third thing is how we are making the use of the technology. Like we have the UPI. So in our side and labor side, we also have the UPI of skills, which is the Skill India Digital Hub. Now, all of these things will combine together and work only if there's a wholehearted approach, which is not divided into what the government does or the private company does. It has to be seen as a whole. And one of my intentions of coming here today was that I was told that all the public policy heads of the different major organizations are here. It is here that we have to think in those lines and fill up the areas where we need to work. So, point I'm trying to emphasize is that there is a conscious decision and thinking on the framework on which the skills.
Crunching those timelines or the gap that occurs between education life cycle versus skill employment versus. Please come. Is that causing a bit of a kind of anxiety right now, because the number of people coming into the job pool is much higher than this troika to work out in sync?
Yeah, when you're saying this, Mr. Takral, you should also realize that there are various ways in which the skilling is already being done. And there are different methods in which it is being done, whether it's the short-term skilling, which we have the PMKVY scheme, as we call it, and Srinivas was there in the earlier department, there also the skilling is done. So overall, there is an emphasis on having a short-term skilling, which is very much required for the entry-level jobs, etc. We also have many ITIs, we have many other institutions. So there is, full emphasis on what we can do at the present. But what I'm trying to understand is that many times what we produce is not what is demanded. It is for that to happen, when they both will click together, then there is a symphony in which the jobs and employments are also work together. And these are the long-term things which you need to handle in order to see the demand for these skills growing in the coming future.
I like the word symphony, so we have to create a symphony here, and one critical piece of that symphony will be the digital sector. Welcome, Mr. Krishnan. I'll come to you in a second and let you absorb what's being talked about, job creation. Mr. Srinivas, you're a critical part of this symphony. You'll either be the audience or you'll be the conductor. So how will it play out? You think the demand for jobs right now versus the required skills in your domain, you're the one who has to implement that vision, plus have a vision of your own to make sure India's economic growth rate is so critically linked to your sector. How are you planning to do this?
Thank you. I would add to what Atul said. Frankly, I'm slightly counterintuitive in my response. I would first of all like to look at jobs and employment as income earning opportunities, not paychecks. So if you were to look at it as a paycheck or end of the month type of a remuneration, then your perspective changes. But if you're looking at opportunity to earn money, a kind of a serial earning, a serial entrepreneurship, a serial, let us say, giver of services, then you're talking about a different ecosystem altogether. In my own personal opinion, the opportunity to earn money in seriatim is not lacking. And that's our experience, most of us. In our daily lives, when we look for certain services to be rendered for our own purposes, we do find that the takers for those requirements are not in adequate numbers, which is a question that Mr. Atul was answering. But if we were trying to formalize it and say, okay, I need X number of people with these kind of degrees, and therefore, then you're talking about a different framing altogether. So I think it is a bit of a framing issue. It's a bit of a mindset issue. And therefore, my instinctive response would be that we should build an efficient marketplace where these two can match. Today, the marketplace is not functioning efficiently because of either the way we regulate, or the way we provide access, or the distances, or whatever you call it. There are gaps which are creating inefficiencies in this marketplace. I think this is my first reaction. Now, talking about that larger issue that you spoke about in terms of urbanization, urban spaces naturally are, as all of us agree, spaces that provide opportunity for employment, opportunity for income generation, opportunity for wealth creation, and so on. In these spaces also, I strongly believe that the opportunity not only exists, but it needs to be, I think, efficiently accessed. So the real challenge is to ensure, both from the private side and the public side, of recognizing what are the opportunities that are getting thrown up. How do you ensure that the responders to that respond efficiently, effectively, and connect the two? Now, for instance, there's a third point which you didn't ask, but I'd like to say it at the moment, because this is very much at the top of my head. I think if we really want to make our dreams come true, we have to give back. When I say we have to give back, I'm not speaking in a purely altruistic manner or a philanthropic manner, but I think we need to reinvest or invest ourselves in the future. And I say it in the context of urbanization. One of the stark challenges of urbanization as it is happening today is that it is happening outside of the cities. That is a big challenge. Most of the built-up area is being built outside the city boundary. A lot of the economic activity is happening outside of the city boundary. A lot of the taxes are being paid outside, and yet we want the cities to support and nurture. So how does this inherent contradiction get resolved? So I think both from the public side and the private side, we have to think that are we nurturing our course to function efficiently? Are we giving back our taxes? Are we investing ourselves back? Why do we vote with our cars and drive out of the city and sleep somewhere else? Why don't we go back into the city and sleep there? Why are we looking and not contributing to the capacity of the city to becoming more efficient, more livable, more happy? So this is the large philosophic question.
Sorry, I mean, just for the policy professionals here, if you could explain, I thought urbanization happening outside city limits would be good. It would expand the urbanized area.
What's happening is this. This is, again, broad numbers. In the last 10 years, if we were to see how much of built-up area has been built in this country, close to around 50-60% is outside of the city limit. So what have we done? So in a way, you have stretched the capacity of the urban infrastructure, and you're forcing it to move out of the boundary, and therefore it would get naturally stretched. And then we go to an area where, because capacity has not been designed for that, and then we do have problems. So because we tend to move there, we pay our taxes there, which are usually non-existent. So we are not giving back. So this is one large issue I think we need to resolve. The second point I really want to make, and which amplifies what Atul says, Atul was speaking about skills. I am talking about capacity. Today, the problem of urbanization is about harnessing all the skills together into capacity. And perhaps there is a need for our larger urban ecosystem to balance the political dynamic with the management dynamic. The management dynamic is where all of you guys would come in. The private sector coming in to step in and give better management services, whether of utilities, whether of services, whether of even a lot of the urban services that we tend to expect the political side of the urban management to respond. I think this kind of a new symphony needs to be created.
All right, so we are already getting a symphony created. Mr. Krishnan, I think you're at the heart of it. I mean, you must be the pianist or definitely one of the biggest part of it. Yesterday, we heard a lot about the tech leaps that we are making right now, whether it's semiconductor, whether it's the kind of technological innovation that India is up to, even DPIs. Will it create more jobs? Or is jobs a central piece of the technological innovation mission that you are writing?
See, I think in India today, if you have any kind of policy, government policy, whether in the manufacturing sector or in the services sector, bereft of an objective to create jobs, there's no point. I mean, ultimately, government policy is all about enhancing welfare, and welfare is about increasing incomes, and increasing incomes is about creating jobs, whether it is an opportunity for self-employment and earning an income, as Srinivas was pointing out, or whether it is paid salaried jobs of the kind that Atul was speaking of. So whichever way you look at it, jobs have to be created, and that's how welfare gets enhanced, and people have to get employed. So whether we are talking about government strategies on the electronics side, semiconductor side, which is fundamentally the manufacture of various devices and their components which are needed for daily use, fundamentally there is employment at every stage of that manufacture. And since it's value-added manufacture, the kind of employment you get is also partly stratified, but you get it at every level, in the sense highly educated PhDs and MTechs and so on who are designing products, down to people who work on the assembly line of putting together various devices, who might be high school passed or who might be, ITI qualified, but all of them get jobs. And I think that's a critical thing of why we are doing it. Semiconductors on their own, for the volume of investment that is needed, the amount of investment that is needed, the number of jobs may be limited. And people may say that, you're spending a lot of money, it doesn't mean so many jobs because it's a highly automated process. Still, there are some high-end jobs which are needed, but more than the jobs on the factory floor itself, you will find that there would be a large number of other companies which need to come in as part of the ecosystem, and the jobs will get created there. Then we come to technology itself, and technology of various kinds, whether it's AI, IoT, the sensor devices, various other kinds of technology which get created. There, I think, innovation holds the key. And as more and more innovators, startups and others get into it, and the innovators are the ones who create the opportunities, both for themselves and for others in terms of jobs. And applying artificial intelligence in the Indian context, because I think India's context is a little different from what the rest of the world is. And in that sense, I think we shouldn't access or we shouldn't look at artificial intelligence with the same degree of skepticism and fear that many other countries would. For two reasons. One, that right now as we speak, most of the jobs which go out are white-collar jobs, office jobs. And to begin with, India's starting point is a little behind. We don't have, our proportion of white-collar jobs are not as many as they are in many other countries, and therefore what we are likely to lose is also relatively smaller. But more importantly, I think these are newer technologies which are adapted more readily by a younger generation, by a younger age group. And as a relatively youthful country and as a country which has a large number of people who are trained in the STEM areas, the opportunities for them to create and use these new technologies like artificial intelligence to create applications, to create opportunities of employment for others, to actually service the rest of the world is huge. I mean, it's a bit like the Y2K opportunity and what happened with the IT sector in the country and the number of jobs that it created. So to that extent, I think the nature of the jobs may change, but in terms of absolute number, even in these newer age technology jobs, I think the number of jobs will only increase and not come down. So which then, I mean, in terms of skilling, the only thing that we need to look at is some kind of either reskilling or upskilling in addition to the entry-level skilling to make sure that, you know, people are able to adapt to the newer circumstance. But even in the technology sector, jobs are critical. And the last point that I'd like to make vis-a-vis technology and jobs is that the digital technologies which get adapted today, when we measure it, we look at it either in terms of devices or the actual software which goes into it, and that's the limited extent to which we look at it. But this technology is horizontal and it gets applied across different sectors. So in other sectors of conventional manufacturing, in other sectors of service delivery, again, digital technologies get applied to a considerable extent. They enhance productivity in some ways, but they also ensure that newer opportunities are created for jobs.
This is hugely optimistic, and it's great that you have mapped what is coming our way. We should be more hopeful and more positive about it. One piece where I feel the symphony between you and Mr. Tiwari may kind of fall out of tune is everybody talks about reskilling, upskilling without mentioning enough of the displacement that will happen. And I again go back to the sense of timing. You cannot always reskill, upskill the existing workforce. So a lot of the adopters of these technology must be the native digital guys. And those going out of jobs may not be the digital natives in that sense. So do you fear that you and Mr. Tiwari may end up being a bit out of sync, not because you want to, because the nature of upskilling, reskilling needed to adapt to this new technology environment is a little difficult?
No, I think, you know, some of it already happens. Many years ago, maybe about 10 years ago or so, I'd visited, TCS has a huge campus in Chennai, right? I mean, it looks like one dragonfly. And in the middle, there's a huge atrium kind of thing, and it's spread on both sides. It's supposed to be their largest campus in the world, and they keep that piece of information very quiet. But having said that, you know, I was there around lunchtime, and suddenly when it was the lunch break, you had this whole atrium flooded with people, maybe about 20, 30,000 people. And most of them, you find, the age group is, say, between early 20s to about early 30s. You hardly found anybody who was 40 or 40 plus. And then, of course, the management cadre with whom I was interacting was more my age at that point, and they were in the 40s or 50s. And then I asked them, saying, look, I find this odd that you have just this demographic there. What happens to all of them? Presumably they go up the ladder and, you know, where do they go and find their place? Only some of them are like you, but it's primarily a flat organization, and they obviously are leaving and going somewhere. And the point that they made is that, you know, they pick up a lot of skills here, they learn a lot of things here, and then they move on and find jobs in other locations, either with the clients that they've worked with, or in terms of setting up newer companies and branching out and starting off newer ventures, and in a number of other locations where they would fit in with their sets of skills. So I think that is the way you need to look at it. So not everybody will necessarily get retrained or upskilled in that particular space. There would be some who fit into that demographic who can do it. There would be others who will have to search for opportunities elsewhere. And I think, like, again, as Srinivas was saying, you need to keep equipping yourselves. I think we've come a long way from, and even within government you see that increasingly. You've come a long way from having a career for 35 years and doing the same thing again and again and somebody taking care of you. It's great comfort, I can assure you, but those jobs are becoming fewer and fewer. And I think the newer generation looks at it very differently from the way you and I would look at it. They look at this as an opportunity. They'd find being in the same job for 35 years really boring. I mean, they actually look for newer challenges and newer things to do. And in many cases, they actually go out and find them.
I wish, I mean, I know I may be in a comfortable job, but you definitely are not. So I don't think that you're the one who's facing that challenge.
Nobody
Mr.
asked.
Tiwari, yeah, I wanted to come to you. And how do you kind of see this mismatch?
See, whenever we talk about the technology and the change in technology, so that danger which you're saying is always there. So now, how do we prepare, other than what Krishnan just said? And let's take an example for the AI. So if you understand that there is certain AI which is required for all, many, and few. If you divide in that sense, then you're also creating the overall, what shall I say, general proficiencies in the AIs. And as and when the technology changes, you go ahead, learn it, and keep yourself upskilled and reskilled. That is the pathway one should have. I'll give you an example of what we're doing, say, our NSTIs with the Microsoft. They have set up the AI labs in our institution, computers, trainers, etc., etc. And our kids, some of them are not even from the science background. They are able to understand and use it for their applications and their offices or the business firms and all that. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is that we are moving towards creating a horizontal layer of the skills which you should have. And on top of that, we have what we call in our skill parlance is Gnosis and the micro-credentials. And if you see the work which our NCVT and our Sector Skill Council and other companies which are doing, so you add it in a small modules so that depending upon what you know, you can learn that. And there's here also the technology helps. For example, if I go and skill in a digital hub and tell these are my proficiencies, and there is the online test is there, they will say that in order to reach that higher proficiency level, or maybe higher wage rate or whatever, you're required to do these kind of skilling, etc., which are also freely available. So that is one part. Second part, what we are trying to do is just now announce in the budget about the skill loans. See, skill loan is something which is created for this kind of the situations where in order to learn AI for few or even many, which require a higher level of skilling, which requires a lot of money, that also is available. And how do we create that kind of situations where the people have the financial wherewithal to do if they want to go on a higher level, or if they want to do it on an incremental level and keep on increasing their proficiency, that will also they can do it. But as Krishnan is saying, there will certain situations will always be there where some people may like to opt for other areas also.
Before I shift gears to kind of a bit of a different topic, Mr. Srinivas, one piece on the urban development and the absorption that you have to do is a question everybody will ask you. When will we have many such urban centers where, for example, the minister was here last night and he was explaining why the bullet train is such an important project, because it will create that one economic powerhouse between Surat, Baroda, Bombay, and a couple of more cities in the middle. And then once you have one big economic powerhouse, then economic prosperity will grow. The question is, do we have enough capacity in the pipeline to absorb this kind of an economic center creation that we are adopting through other infrastructure means? So you're not only worried about where do skilled people get the jobs, or do you have enough skills to absorb in the housing sector, but do we have enough cities to absorb this economic activity?
Yeah, thank you. I'll answer it in two parts. The first part is, in how many spots of country are we looking at this massive growth? Usually we tend to go by this number of 4,500 cities, etc. The reality is there are about 80 to 90 spots that are going to be the convergence spots of the larger economic activity. They're the convergence spots. So that means there is a, okay. So that means there is a certain scale that is already getting built. And that scale is getting responded to in terms of the massive infrastructure push that government is seeing, and it's visible. You yourself spoke about the bullet train. The other dimension is, where do we get the capacity to handle this? In fact, as I was hearing my colleagues, both are very dear friends, I was reflecting, and I'll tell you that story. That, of course, there is, as Krishnan mentioned, if you're talking about chip designing and all that, perhaps there is attrition and things, stuff like that. But for the sector I'm dealing with, in terms of, let's say, construction capabilities, management capabilities, so on and so forth, there's a story I'd like to tell you which would be very heartwarming for all of you. In the last 15 years, all of us grew used to the idea that furniture would typically come from China. Mostly we'd step into large showrooms and furniture will come from China. Very recently, I went into the Parliament of India because it's just taken over. And to my utter delight, I discovered that the entire furniture, the entire woodwork was done by people who came out of Bikaner. If you look at their formal qualification, educational qualification, it would be, as you would suspect, maybe 10th class pass or something. But they've managed to scale up. They have set up factories in Bombay. They've managed to respond to this huge project. And an institution that celebrates our democracy is built by our own craftsmen, our own people, who have been able to respond to the modern management methodology. Had they not had the ability, which means had that gap been there, they could not have done this. But they've managed to transcend it, and they did it. So therefore, I look at all of this with a huge sense of optimism. The optimism that this economic spirit and opportunity that is getting created in this 80, 90 odd spaces, these 80, 90 odd spots broadly represent about 450 cities. Okay? And the larger ecosystem is equally capable, is my experience. We just need to ensure that they have the ability to access the opportunity. So that is where we have to connect these two dots.
And that's where I get the symphony between urban infrastructure, physical infrastructure, all of it will play. Let me just shift gears a little bit because, I mean, you're in a forum where a lot of private sector representatives are listening to you. Mr. Krishnan, first to you. One of the reasons they say the IT industry is, I know it's a cliche, but IT industry developed because the government stayed out of it. And a lot of jobs got created because the government didn't bother them and only came to them when the sunset clause had to be looked at on the tax front. But rest of it was left to that. I personally believe that kind of sense has changed because now there is a better collaboration. For the sake of job creation, do you think this collaboration needs to be further strengthened, deepened, and be more strategic rather than by default India, the IT industry grew despite the government?
I think the important thing is, it's a question of how the government agencies approach a particular task. And a facilitative approach is, I think, what is needed. And I can honestly say that between the time that Srini and I joined the civil service 35 years ago and were trained together, to now, there's been a sea change in priorities and there's been a sea change even in approach, right? And the idea that government and government agencies need to operate in such a way as to enable and facilitate businesses to grow and ensure that more jobs are provided, and jobs basically comes as an outcome of growth, is something which is now much more accepted and much more the norm than what it used to be earlier. So, the government, you like it or you don't, they won't really stay away. I mean, even if you're an IT industry and you don't have anything else to do, you'll have to get a building plan approval, you'll have to do a variety of other things. So it's not as if they're going to be
one of you two. Anyway.
So they'll turn up somewhere or the other. So the question really is the approach which is taken there in terms of whether it is facilitative and whether it is something which everyone understands within the government within the organization that we are trying here for a larger objective of facilitating economic activity, legitimate economic activity that doesn't break the law and doesn't go against public policy. So those who are within legitimate economic activity need to be facilitated in order to grow and in order to sort of scale up quickly so that they can provide jobs and they can do what needs to be done. And that mindset and attitude, I think, is increasingly what many people are seeing across governments. There could be exceptions, there always are exceptions. And the second part of it is that, that people mistook profit-making to profiteering. And everyone assumed that anyone making profits was actually profiteering, and that was something which was bad. And I mean, I'm talking about people within government. I think to that extent, definitely the mindset has changed, and people do look at that profit-making is a legitimate activity. The private sector gets in with the government to actually operate in a particular area, clearly with a profit motive, because that is what leads to greater efficiency. As long as there are no windfall gains and they're not profiteering, which is against public policy, they should be permitted to make all the legitimate profits that they make. I mean, this is the other understanding which I think has increasingly come into the rest of government. So both of these, in my view, are significant developments which we need to recognize. There's still some way to go. I wouldn't say that everyone thinks the same way, and sometimes the way that various rules are interpreted is identical to the way it ought to be done. And there could still be certain regulations and rules which are attempting to achieve a different objective but ending up doing something else. So those issues are certainly there. And in terms of, and this is a constant effort. Ease of doing business is a constant effort. And what we assume is good in one situation need not necessarily be good in another situation.
Mr. Tiwari, on the role of private sector, and I know your ministry has been extremely dynamic in trying to kind of be that bridge between what is needed, because honestly, the private sector itself cannot do the scaling that scaling and skilling is something that the government can achieve far better, and you have the vision of where the economic activity is coming up. What is that one expectation, given that you have so many private sector representatives here? What is it that one thing you would further like to see from them coming in order to kind of help you sleep better and help you create a better symphony as you move forward?
Can I ask 2-3 things?
Say that again? Can I ask me a question?
Can I ask 2-3 things instead of just one?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
You can have a full agenda.
See, whatever we are trying to do in this skilling, the biggest problem so far has been that what do we skill people for that is not being demanded. So the fundamental thing which we need to do and expect from the industry is to be forthright, more forthcoming in terms of the skill set they would require. Second point, I would say that, as I said, that the skilling should not be left just to lower level function, but it should be part of their overall HR policies, and we need to have a very clear-cut demarcation of the skills which we require in their organization, in their factories and their offices. Third thing is that they need also to have apprentices, which is as part of their legal requirement as per the Apprentices Act that they need to employ, so we'd like them to take up the apprentices. Fourth thing is that there are many places where the industries themselves are doing a lot of scaling, and we'll encourage them, like Mr. Thakral we have done with the Meta and also doing with Chetan, Microsoft, and so other big companies. Yesterday we had a skilling program with the Airbus, we had with the Swiggy. So you name the companies, we are trying and approaching them so that we would like you to engage with us on the Skill India Digital Hub, where you can offer the skilling which is being provided by you, or if the kind of the job competencies which you require, which will help us improve our AI within the SIDH so that we are able to design the skilling courses, and as well as telling the micro-credentialings and NOSES and other things. One very important part which has been announced in the budget this time and which we require a very explicit, I'm seeking help for the industry through Mr. Thakral's generosity, is that we are going to have 1,000 ITIs which are going to be developed, and the budget foresees that it will be majorly government, which is the central government and state government, and there is a part of the industries also to come forward. We have relaxed our guidelines of the ITIs, new ITIs and adoption to a great extent. We would like the companies to come with us, and we are trying to have a framework very much ready, and we'd like the industries to come with us, especially like my friend Krishnan was saying about semiconductor or any other manufacturing sector or wherever, where we can give a very top-notch skilling for them. We have sufficient budget provision for that. What we look forward from the industry is to engage with us in terms of what will be their requirement and in terms of how we can work with them in order to manage these very high-ranking Indian ITIs, which we can call them with other name. And this is the most immediate priority. And we had our discussion, Mr. Thakral, in our office, Kaushal Bhavan, with many industries. In fact, our teams have gone about 4 or 5 states, so they also are discussing. We'd like the industry to come and talk with us, help us in designing so that on a major part of the investment done by the government, and the key part will be the industry collaboration so that our training, whatever we're giving, is up to date as per the requirement and dynamic. Thank you very much.
I mean, great. This is definitely a great forum for inviting the industry to do that, because this will be music to the ears of all public policy professionals to do much more. And I'm sure many of them will be taking this up with you. And thanks for making that outright call. I'll try to wrap it up and then hand over to Chetan, and if he has any questions, as well as for the vote of thanks. I'll start with you, Mr. Srinivas. You were here last year, I'm told. You were in a different ministry. Hopefully you'll be back again soon in a different avatar. My question is, what should we expect from you, given that we were assured last night of a 10 to 14% nominal growth rate in the economy? From your lens, what should we expect from you when you're back next year?
Maybe I'll answer it from what I will request you to respond to. That
Sure.
should be my answer. I'll leave you with 2 or 3 large numbers, which is really the opportunity. The first large number is that in the next 25 years, we're going to add 40 crore population to urban areas. Please take the large numbers into account. 40 crore, 400 million to urban areas, number one. Number two, we are operating the 3rd largest metro rail system in the world already. We are at 1,400 kilometers long. Going forward, we might touch around 2,200. That is the second large number. Third, as I said, there's a huge amount of densification that is happening, and it's bound to happen. What I'd like to request the private sector to look at is, number one, prospect the opportunities that are there. Because when so much of public infrastructure is being built, there's something called transit-oriented development that has become a catchy thing. A lot of people understand it. So what it means is when you have this entire infrastructure carrying capacity, are we building for all this population that is being built, that is naturally going to grow? So that is where I'd request the private sector to look at the opportunity around these corridors and prospect that opportunity and respond to it. That is the first thing. Second, look at the opportunity to manage utilities and public spaces around all of this. There is a huge opportunity, and that is where there is I would say, capacity deficit that can be plugged in. I think the private sector should and must come in and step in. This is the second great opportunity. And the third is to really build the new utility infrastructure that is needed and respond to the new markets that are evolving. I think these are the 3 things we should definitely look for, and all of you should respond and encourage your clients to respond to as a business and an economic opportunity. And on my part, what will I do when I come back next year? I'll hope to be happier, having done a part of it.
We definitely will welcome that. Mr. Krishnan, yours is one sector which pretty much changed from the time you entered, and as we speak now, some innovation must have happened, some new invention must have happened. 1 year down the line, what do you think we'll be seeing when you're back with us?
I think a year down the line, what we should probably see first is India's own semiconductor production to scale actually taking place, which is where it is scheduled to happen, and I would like to see that being turned out. A year down the line, I'd like to see at least 3 or 4 working AI models which would have sort of come out of the India AI mission based on the kind of support that the government has given. Third, I would like to see a structure and an architecture where, I mean, we are dealing so much with data and so much with individuals' private data and other data. I'd like to see a robust structure which we have in place, which addresses both the cybersecurity issues and the privacy issues in this. A working arrangement which gives us assurance that, technology can't be used by bad actors in a way to affect what all of us as citizens come to expect as public safety. So I think these 3 would be major priorities that I would look to happen in the coming year or so.
All very critical, all close to our hearts. Mr. Tiwari, is there more homework for us than what we've already heard for the private sector? More homework for us by the time you come back next year with us?
No, I think that is more than, if they do that much, is good enough.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you last night the minister gave us homework. Looks like even the offices follow the same process. You're giving homework back to us. And it's a very refreshing change, I must say.
If I give more homework, I'll have to do extra homework.
Yeah, that's also true. I will hand over to Chetan, but just to say thank you, all 3 of you, for sharing one thought which I felt sounded like perfect symphony, largely because it looks like nothing is being done at point of time. There is clearly a plan, whether it's urban infrastructure, whether what you are saying, the semiconductor mission, or what Mr. Tiwari is saying, the kind of ITIs you're looking forward to. Chetan, clearly sense of optimism definitely to end with.
Absolutely, and to Mr. Krishnan's points, maybe the gods above have said Tathastu. And on that very positive, auspicious note, I have the bittersweet task of bringing the curtains down on the 11th PAFI Forum. And let me go through the motions of thanking the various individuals and partners associated with this fabulous event. Thanks to all of our distinguished panelists for the high-quality, thought-provoking conversations and discussions we've had in the last 2 days. The conversations have been very important in enhancing our understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing India today. And as we conclude this forum, I am struck by the collective optimism that has been quite evident throughout these past 2 days. We have heard repeatedly about the unique geopolitical advantages India enjoys, whether it be the strengthening of the US-India relations, the groundbreaking ICET framework, or the increasing global recognition of India's potential. This seems to be truly India's moment, a window of opportunity that we must seize with both hands. At the same time, we have been reminded that our demographic advantage is not a given path to success. With a median age of just 29 years, we are in a prime position to shape the future. However, as Mr. Tiwari pointed out, there is a need for that perfect, harmonious symphony to occur. And at the same time, there is a need for significant investments in human capital to ensure that our workforce remains a driving force for economic growth, and also the need to continue to push for the necessary policy reforms that will elevate India's global standing and avoid the pitfalls of the middle income trap that we discussed and debated quite a bit yesterday. The thoughts shared on India's role in global affairs have been particularly enlightening. And I'm sure all of you here would agree with me on that front. From the need to address agricultural diversification to the emphasis on transforming Indian cities into economic hubs, it's clear that the path to a 30 trillion economy requires innovation across industries, sectors, and obviously robust governance frameworks. India's non-threatening rise on the world stage, our vision of Vishwa Bandhu, as the ambassador very eloquently put it yesterday, will be underpinned by tech disruption, political stability, areas where we must lead with some degree of confidence. As policy professionals, we have a responsibility to act as socio-economic architects, guiding India toward sustainable and inclusive growth. The work we do today will undoubtedly determine whether we achieve our ambitions of becoming a $7 trillion economy by 2030 and a developed nation by 2047. And to end, I'd like to thank the many sponsors and partners of PAFI for reposing faith in the organization year after year. Thanks a lot. I also want to extend a big thank you to the entire PAFI team, Deep and Lakshmi and rest of the folks here. Very clearly your dedication and hard work in organizing this outstanding event is, very visible and is for all to see. Your diligence has ensured that the forum remains one of the most important platforms for shaping the future of India's public policy landscape. Finally, to all of you who have taken part in these discussions, thank you for your participation, for your commitment, and let's carry these learnings into our respective domains and work collaboratively and ensure that India's rise is not only swift, but also sustainable and inclusive. Thank you so much, and see you next year.